Hi everyone, I'm Russell, and this is my project on spirituality as a lens. To start, I'll define a lens. In the course content, we define a lens as the spiritual selection of meaning. Selection is a set of actual meanings, separated from all potential ones. A lens can be used to define a horizon. Misused or poorly created lenses leave room for blind spots. 3 examples of lenses in the course content we covered are the Midnight Gospel, Jesus Camp, and the 2 Popes. Our first example, the Midnight Gospel, teaches us that reactions to traditional religion created desensitized spiritual spaces, encourages mindfulness and drug use. I find the show's assertions to be elitist. The show ignores difficulty in obtaining access to digital spaces like X or TikTok. It also ignores how some of us get too stressed to maintain a mindful atmosphere, especially due to the persistent meddling of others. The Midnight Gospel also claims in its first episode that drug use is good for people, even though the drug they depict, marijuana, is illegal in many states. Taking into account that people like to fit in, the cheapest iPhone costs $529. I got that from the Apple Store on iPad. Alternatives to this platform do exist, though I would point out that judgmental people notice things like a burner phone or a cheap alternative to high-budget projects, which creates fears to conquer. Someone who cannot work and who is on disability pay cannot earn this phone reasonably, accounting for bills, food, entertainment, transportation, and other needs without relying on others. Data plans with Mint Mobile, the cheapest option on the market, cost $15 at the lowest. There are also tablets like the Kindle and iPad, which are great, and I'm using one right now. I just have my script on here. But this was a gift that cost $400. While owning these devices can lower stress, digital platforms, drug use, and mismanaged accumulated stress contribute to an individual's chances of encountering traumatic scenarios in life. The film Jesus Camp, our next example, discusses the raising of children to combat radical Islamic terror. People isolate their children to encourage preferred beliefs as parents. They indoctrinate children to follow evangelical beliefs in the film and point out how they believe in it as successful. Even if the movie is fake, it fails to acknowledge the non-Islamic threats to evangelicals and those they aim to protect, the dangers of authoritarianism, especially in the context of religion, children, and the applications of both lenses, the fragility of religions built up using isolation and idolization of men over God and religion, particularly I'd say Christian religions, and all the additional blind spot created by the intersections of these beliefs. I want to call it in particular the way the evangelicals pray for George W. Bush directly in the film. They teach children in an isolated environment that the president needs their help to elect the safest justice for the evangelicals in their mission to prevent Islamic terror, despite the fact that Islamists hate abortion. From my perspective, praying directly for someone means you failed to acknowledge God working in mysterious ways, which is a big part. I'm not sure if that's a big part in evangelicalism, and I know it's a big part in Catholicism. I was kind of figuring that maybe I need to do a little bit of research on this one, I'll admit, but I would assume they're the same. Point is, they teach children in an isolated environment that the president needs their help to elect the safest justice for evangelicals, and from this perspective, praying directly for someone means you failed to acknowledge God working around your perspective entirely, and God can do whatever God wants, and God is going to do whatever is actually best for everyone who believes in him. A lot of people pray wrong. They pray with too narrow of a mindset, and they expect to know where the solution is coming from, and I understand it's very human, but I think a lot of people pray wrong. They don't take into account that there's things outside their knowledge when they do that. All right. The final course content is the 2 popes. It states that authority changes over time, that the Catholic oversight window changes with each new member at all levels, and that selection and agency are achieved through the faith's influence on believers and non-believers alike. I think this leaves blind spots surrounding the impact of Catholicism on non-Catholic structures, the non-Catholic definitions of morality, and the speed of moral optimization over time. To me, this film displays all the themes of the modern republic. An Overton window is the political context of a generation in its current iteration. It represents the current authority's desire to change reality or maintain it. There exist things outside it, and the responsibility of left-wing influences is to change it or suggest new ideas, while right-wing ones maintain current trends or improve slowly when necessary. Basically, left-wing people create a new idea within a given system, and a right-winger is going to improve upon that idea or reject it. And then it's the job of the liberal influence, in this case, the American context, to come up with another better idea. It falls to individual people within the faith to find representation in the Catholic hierarchy and make their own meetings out of their religion contexts. How they fit into Catholicism politically can be different than their secular voting orientation. What this project in this class means to me is that religion itself and its meanings are interpreted through the lens of government to create imperialism. New solutions are successful but profane, like development of projectile weapons for battle, and the pacification of danger surrounding conflict, things like the Geneva Conventions and anything related. The implementation of these solutions creates an elitist mentality which makes people feel left out. The lowest common denominator people do not define their own mentalities in the face of oppression out of fear of increased stress. This leaves successful people in bad positions. Their mentalities which created oppression also created their successes. Sometimes people create mindsets ignorant of the suffering those mindsets and their implications create. These can lead to things like business monopoly and mastery of concepts. In these situations, top-down societies like nations control information to further their success. Institutions created to clarify information like non-profit organizations destroy barriers to elitism, furthering goals of the needy. These sorrowful, needy people are the indicator of imperialism, but only because of the mentalities of the people who try to protect them, only because of the mentalities of those who protect them from fear. I say this to stress expressly the information, goods, and services accessible to angry, poor people destroy imperialist sentiment, but wealth gaps are the cause of it. If everyone is sad, angry, or afraid, or disenfranchised, which is where that comes from, then imperialism comes from outside forces, which causes war. Disenfranchised people conquer fear with bravery. They gain control through their bravery, and they become afraid to lose control over everything else as their influence expands. These influences reach one another, creating nations and national identity to control the use of lenses to select meaning. Germany is the perfect example of how nations are created. Those nations learn and apply thrift, discipline, and rational organization to reduce imperialism as they experience their effects. The ways countries handle this reduction of imperialism creates splinter groups and revolutions. When the dust settles, people find increased representation, like the fall of the Berlin Wall at the end of the Cold War. At this point in the cycle, old successful solutions which caused oppression are banned, like narcotics or political violence. There is then an increase in representation, which redefines culture with modernization. Many nations revere bravery as sacred and despise the creation of new fears as leftist ideas. Competition between ideas is called a culture war, and these are used to further reduce imperialism. We tell stories to fight cultural battles and commodify ideas to tell better stories. We make products to tell those commodified stories, like Campbell's soup cans, which tell the story of branding and advertisement. The ones from the 60s are among the best designed product labels ever. Humans created capitalism to produce a meta-competitive, which means competitive markets within competitive markets, known as market economy, to produce forms of currency or capital. The current strongest market uses humans as capital even when it wastes them. I think humanity is in a good spot right now, but we need to apply Weber's principles we covered in our class to our use of human capital and save the lives of the world's workers to prevent the suffering caused by both capitalism and communism in the wake of Cold War. Alternatives will arise if we allow them to diversify for us and create new spheres of influence. Not everything is the American government's problem, and we need to act like it.